Welcome again, people. My name is Timo Felim. I'm from Vendip Capital, and for those that don't know us yet, we're an early stage pre-Series A fund hailing from Helsinki, and we invest purely in SaaS companies in the Nordics and in the Baltics, and primarily into companies that have traction from a large international market. So what we call the pre-Series A stage, and we take a very hands-on role to help the companies and our portfolio companies to grow to Series A stage and then get some new, fresh, top-tier funds to join along the ride. So that's us, and this is Vendip SaaS Camp, day 3, and we will be focusing on product especially. And for that, we have Jevgeni Kabanov from Bolt joining us, the Chief Product Officer. And before I let Jevgeni go, I just wanted to mention that we brought Jevgeni here because he has an extensive background in building successful new products, and he can tell you more about that. But in this session, I think you'll get a really great framework for organizing your thoughts on building value in new products based on the views that he has on the topic. So welcome, Jevgeni, and we're really excited to have you here. And the stage is yours.
Thank you. Oh, that's very okay. So hi. So let me just skip to the next. Oh no, wait. Yeah. So let me just quickly introduce myself and why am I doing this? So I've been with Bolt for the last 2.5 years, and I joined them basically to head the product management, product design. And also I ended up being the head of new verticals, meaning that aside from running the product management team and product design team, I was also incubating the new teams fully, including operations, sales, like kind of the whole 9 yards. And so I ended up launching 3 verticals like that, which was food delivery. Some of you may have ordered from Bolt Food. So then rentals, which is mainly our scooters, and then Bolt for Business. And we have 3 more which are in the works, which are incubating either with me directly or within my current verticals. And so this kind of like, and before that, I founded my own tech company, Zero Turnaround, and exited that successfully. It was very much fun. We also built like 5 products for developers. Only 2 of them, unfortunately, were successful, maybe 2.5 if I'm optimistic. And I also invested in the last like 2-3 years. I invested and advised like 10 plus companies, and saw probably about 50 companies. And so what I wanted is to kind of share the things I learned and share the way I look at new products. And why did I focus on new products specifically? Is that I think that there's quite a lot of information out there about how to kind of run A/B tests, how to optimize things, how to scale things, and it's a relatively well understood area, but I think it's much less understood how to build new products from scratch. And this is relevant. I assume that a lot of you here are from young startups, and so like when Timo said that like a lot of the guys will be from fresh startups, then this is something that could be useful for you. And so let me start talking about that then. The high-level framework is kind of like this. This is how I think about the new products. I define what is the hard value proposition, and I know that it sounds arcane, but I'll focus on that. What is it? I do for a while only high confidence, high ROI activities. Then I let the hard value proposition drive the growth. And then finally, we plug in GTM, go-to-market activities to accelerate the growth. So this is high-level recipe, and we'll go through it step by step. So don't worry about understanding it, and we'll return to it in as the very last slide as well. So first of all, let's focus on value proposition. I think this is the most important thing to understand, and the most important thing that I kind of think of when I try to define a new vertical, when I try to think of a new segment in our products. And the first question I ask is like, what's the value proposition and what's the hard value proposition? And what the hell is this differentiation between hard and soft value proposition? So usually when you talk about value proposition, then this is something that we offer to the customer in exchange for the money, whether direct money or whether through their attention, which we then monetize somehow differently. but this is what we offer to the customer. And one big problem I've seen is that people tend to think like, hey, well, when I ask like a startup, what's your value proposition? They say, well, our interface is better than the competitor. And I ask, how is it better? And they're like, well, it's like, it's faster, it's prettier. And so, but my problem is that I just don't see this as like a true value proposition. And so what I started doing, I started separating value proposition into hard value proposition and soft value proposition. Hard value proposition is something that is highly measurable. Usually you can literally attach a metric or like a few metrics to it, and it has a direct impact on customer satisfaction, right? It's something, it's like money. If we give the people money, and then if we give them more money, they'll be probably happier, right? Or like if we give them time or like something very specific. I'll go in more detail a little later. And soft value prop is basically everything else. There is a lot of stuff that we can do to improve to improve the stuff that we're doing, but like it's less measurable. It's usually secondary. And what I like about it, that unlike other frameworks that I've seen, like Kano framework, jobs to be done, UX, kind of what they call goal-directed design, which all have like kind of elements of that, but this is really good at focusing on teams, at what matters. And this is super important in the early stage product, because you really, you need to quickly create a lot of value for your customers to really create a good kind of relationship with your customers to build the market. And so the faster you can do it, the better it is. And focusing on hard value propositions is the best way to achieve it quickly. So, so this is an example. So like, I think that 80% of your energy early on has to go to this hard value proposition, and 20% may go to the other, to the soft one. And so hard value proposition is typically price. If you can offer the same thing that the users already have, but cheaper, that's always great value proposition. Revenue, if you can create something that boosts the customer top line, that's always strong value proposition. Doesn't matter if it's a business or a consumer. Like this is more B2B typical, consumer typical, that you just make things cheaper for them. In B2B, more typical is you give revenue. Saving costs, that can apply to both consumer and B2B. Like, if you basically somehow reduce costs, and a lot of like e-commerce is a great example of that. Literally drives down costs by reducing price that you pay, right? So price and costs are very often the same for consumers, but maybe even different for business, because there's direct what you pay for the software versus or like whatever product versus what you actually affect on bottom line might have. Time saved and goals achieved, right? So if I have some goals and the software enables me to achieve those goals faster or better or like whatever, that can also be a hard value proposition. And soft is, and this is so funny because like innovation is kind of almost a dirty word at Bolt, because we're not seeking innovation. We're not seeking innovation itself. We're seeking customer value. And innovation is often a path to customer value, but very often a path to customer value is just executing well on a few very basic things, and it's much better to invest into that than into innovation. User experience can sometimes bring out hard value proposition, or it can support it, but a lot of kind of user experience stuff is, again, it's kind of secondary, especially in early and new products, and they're not critical. Like, again, some basic things need to be gotten right, but like having a great UX is rarely critical to the success unless your product hard value proposition something to do with some goals achieved, and for that you need a great user experience. Same with brand most often is soft value proposition, unless you're building like a really premium luxury products where brand is actually a primary value proposition, right? And then it's measurable, it's important, and then the situation flips. So none of this is as usually in building in entrepreneurship and so on. Nothing is ever completely fixed in stone, but this is kind of the high level framework that I used to think about it. And so when we take, for example, ride hailing, which is something that obviously is well known, well understood nowadays, and it has only three qualities that are hard value proposition. It's price, it's how much you pay for your ride, it's ETA, how quickly you get your ride, and it's quality. And the quality here means like how new is the car, how rude is the driver, and so on. Like it's all to do with the actual physical experience. And What is great if you just focus, and here, like quality is actually, it's a threshold. Beyond certain point, you get diminishing returns. So you need a good enough quality, and then you can purely, like any improvements to ETA and price is basically like improvement in hard value proposition for the customer. And when we look at soft, then there's a lot of stuff that sounds really cool, but in reality doesn't matter, and we still don't have it, and it's okay. Like pooling, like it seems like really innovative, really logical, really great story, but it's also and pooling, meaning like if you basically have already people going from point A to point B, like why don't we pull the rides together and put more people in each ride? Like when you dig deep into it, then it sounds really cool. It sounds really great idea, but it has a lot of issues where it actually does not drive the hard value proposition up. Like it's quite theoretically should drive down the price, but in reality, the density you need for that it makes it like really, really hard to sustain in most places. Then user experience, where you have things like split fare, which is basically people can just manage it among themselves. And like, it's really, when your product is really mature, then you start turning your attention to things like that. Okay, like we've shared the ride together, and now we have to split the fare. Like, okay, I'm gonna transfer, you have the money. Like the transfer UX is really good right now. So like, it's not a terribly important bit to worry. Like people can do it. And same with brand, right? So this is kind of the example of ride hailing, where we have few things which we can measure really, really well, and then everything else by default falls into soft. And when we run out of the ability to drive value of leverage in the hard value proposition, then of course we focus on the soft, because it's not that you can't, but soft is almost always optimization, and like hard, which is almost always like where you really can drive a lot of new value. Okay, so generally, like when I look at any kind of new product, when I look at any company that is as an angel investor, then I try to understand what is the value proposition, and it can be like can be very different ways how it means. Sometimes I just cannot find this hard value proposition. Like for example, recruitment, theoretically there is hard value proposition, meaning that like when I see like recruitment software, then theoretically hard value proposition is this successful recruits, but but the cycles there are so long and the metrics are so kind of devoid of reality, then I still have not seen anything where like this hard value proposition has been successfully kind of attacked. Like almost always in recruitment, everything else is attacked. Like, okay, you know, we need to manage the pipeline, we need to manage the marketing, which is all like marketing is, there is some hard value proposition because top of the funnel at least can be related to successful recruitment, but almost everything else is like really, really soft. Then sometimes people don't understand that if you take a regular business and then add technology to that, or add cryptocurrency, like, and technology can be like digitalization or cryptocurrency or AI or chatbot, that does not create this hard value proposition, right? And a very, very nice example of that is public transportation. And I don't mean the kind of the infrastructure part of public transportation, where there is a place to create hard value because there are some complexities you can tackle. But I mean the consumer part of public transportation, there's quite a lot of this mobility as a service companies, which are trying to kind of aggregate and show you, okay, here, and they're adding really, really kind of soft value. It's a little bit more comfortable to find like your station and to plan your route, but there's really, they can drive the ticket price down. They can't get the buses to go faster. They cannot get them to appear earlier. So the only thing they can is a bit help me plan my route, and maybe I wait a bit less on that. So the only kind of hard value proposition that you can think of is how long do I wait on the bus stop, and they maybe can drive it a bit better down by having real-time info and allowing me to basically wait less for the bus to plan my route better. But it's not a very strong value proposition. This is why, you know, there's no so far billion mobility as a service transport aggregators, no unicorns, at least that I know of, because it's quite hard to add hard value there. Sometimes there's definitely hard value but it's super hard to differentiate from what others are doing. A great example is like package delivery, like what DPD and DHL and so on. And there's a lot of like startups there, but my biggest like the only thing kind of to attack there is the internal inefficiencies of those companies, which there might be some, but they're all doing the right things. they already have okay technology. They're already doing this hub and spoke distribution and so on. So there's not like a obvious place that you can and the hard value prop is there basically time to deliver and time of how long does it take to deliver and the price of delivery. And it's not obvious that you can drive significant down either one in a big way, just because the companies that are there, they're doing probably an okay job, right? And finally, sometimes hard value prop can be related to network size. So and then it kind of becomes really, really hard to compete. Like a search engine is a good example. Nobody can compete with Google because they have the critical mass of the data, they have the critical mass of technology, and just catching up with them, and they constantly kind of stay ahead of competition. And we still have not hit the point of kind of this diminishing returns. Like often there is a point of diminishing returns where the critical mass no longer is important, right? But with them, like it seems like still there's no like real competition, even though a lot are trying. But it seems like the amount of data and the amount of technology they have is just ahead of everybody else still. So like, especially the amount of data is hard to match. So this is kind of just to a very high level of what are the different value props? How do I think about it? But this hard value prop for me is key to building a successful business in any, not even in technology, in anywhere. Then measuring, one thing that I highly recommend is that very often teams get into this very kind of binary idea that that having or not having some feature is like a make it or break it thing in the market, but it is actually rarely so. So and the question that really well answers the value proposition of a particular feature, even without any research, is like, okay, so how much do we have to reduce price to make up for the lack of this feature, right? And this way, instead of saying that, okay, like that feature X is blocking us from entering the market, we can say, okay, feature X costs us 10% of our revenue, right? And we have to give it up, and then we basically get the business whichever way. So very often that's how kind of we look at it. And when like sales operations or somebody asks like, hey, how can I go out in the market? How can I execute without this feature X? And ask, okay, like, so how much of the revenue it costs us? Like, what is the discount we have to give? Because all of us in the end are selling something, right? So what is the discount we have to give to make up for the difference? It's not possible. Never again, like there's this attention economies like games. You cannot just, but even there you can there's some value of it. Like you can discount, you can give away for free, but yeah, it's a bit tougher in the attention economy. But in non-attention economies where you actually charge a price, then this is always a like really good question. And then as an example, when we launched food delivery, we launched like a super bare bones app. We had like basic list of restaurants. We had crappy search. We didn't have any ability to target users, and but we just basically we had even more. We didn't even have a feature for collecting delivery fee. Because we just made the delivery fee. We just made deliveries free for everybody, and the fact that it had free deliveries made up for all the deficiencies for a while. And and that was that. And then we started building it all up, and then like basically also increasing the delivery fee as we created made up more of this kind of soft value prop elsewhere, and some of it was hard value prop as well. And like basically, as we made it up, we also raised the price because we now had a better value proposition. I think it's a great example that you can really go really bare bones as long as you kind of make it up in usually pricing. So one thing also is very important to understand that often the value proposition is non-linear. Like basically doubling the size of the company, like best companies, best markets where we're doubling the size of the company, quadruples the amount of value you create for your users or something like that. Like, so it's not just like that basically the bigger you are, the more value you create for your users. And these are the best markets because this is the only way to create a moat. This is the only way to protect yourself competitively. And not every market has it, and not all markets have it to the same level. Like some markets, and this is not a property of a product, by the way. This is it's a property of a market. So like if you don't have a natural moat in your market, it will be very, very hard to create it in your product. outside of like kind of the usual that is just economy of scale, then outside of that, it will be quite hard for you to design one, because they're quite endemic to the market. And good examples are social networks, like which basically the more people you have in the network, the more value you create for everybody, because the more content is there created, the more content is there consumed, the more connected everybody is, and the harder it is to compete with them, right? And to have a social network, you need kind of critical mass both globally and per region. So there are some regional social networks which are quite successful, but people have connections cross-border as well, though a lot less cross-border connection than they have inside the country or region. Like online travel agencies is a great example that you need to have hotel coverage across the world, because the bigger your hotel coverage is, basically the harder it is to compete with you. So the bigger the network, the bigger you are, the harder you are to compete, which is why the online travel agencies, there's only very few of them and a couple of regional players. E-commerce is a classical example. We need kind of regional critical mass, and the bigger you are, the better prices you get from and it's generally to any retail applies, right? So the bigger you are, the better prices you get from distributors, the more so you don't have just economy of scale on your own fees, but you also get better pricing from the other side, and so the better value proposition you can offer to your users. And like food delivery and ride-hailing are good examples where like we kind of build a network per city, but across the cities there's not a ton. So you really kind of, when looking at the market, it's really good to understand the non-linearity, like kind of how does growing the market change this primary hard value proposition metrics. Because if you understand it well, then maybe it's really worthwhile investing quickly to reach this critical mass, because most probably you can run much better unit economics at the bigger size than you can at the smaller size. So like kind of the more non-linear value prop is, the more important it becomes to grow really quickly, and the more return you get on your investment.
Yeah, Yevgeny, if I can interject really quickly. I have a point on this, especially related to SaaS companies. First of all, I'll still mention that do post your questions on the Q&A tab. I already see a couple of questions, one from Gleb and one from Kirill. Thanks for those. I didn't take Gleb's one because I didn't quite understand it, but you can read through those, Yevgeny, at the end then. But nevertheless, coming back to the sort of non-linear value prop and sort of the network effects that you can find in the SaaS companies. I was trying to think of some SaaS companies that really have a network effect, and often they're kind of consumer facing or even sort of marketplace like offerings that they have. First one that I came up with was OpenTable. Basically, I don't know if many of you know it. It's a restaurant booking service, or at least initially started like that, but basically, naturally, the more restaurants there are, the better it is for everybody who's using the service or the consumers. And then also we use this CRM called Affinity. It's made especially for funds like us, where you can share contacts of potential target companies and then ask opinions and intros and so forth. So there's one, I think, kind of a value prop there. Of course, that's not their main thing. They're offering a CRM, so that's kind of a sideline to their main value prop that they have. But then another that came to mind was this Finnish company called Rundit, which basically enables easy reporting for portfolio companies. So the more companies and the more VCs are on it, the better it is for everybody, because you can get the reporting done on the platform. So these kinds of names came up in my mind, at least. But quite often it's in the SaaS world, there's some kind of a consumer element, or it's a B2B2C company, or then there's a marketplace that they're offering alongside with the SaaS company, I think.
Yeah, non-linearity is most endemic to marketplaces, but what SaaS companies also have is just non-linearity of data, that from certain thresholds, data enables you to create kind of different types of services, and also some like kind of third-party marketplaces as well, which is very, very often only from a certain size. You can also offer like this third-party marketplaces, which really allows to add a lot more value and a lot more lock-in for customers, right?
Yeah. And I think that data point is another thing. I couldn't come up with an example on the spot, but I think that's definitely a valuable sort of a value prop where the more data you have through the customers that are joining along, the better it is for everybody.
Another thing that is very often is that in big companies, you will have local network effects that the more people are using your software in that company, the better, the more value everybody is getting out of it.
Exactly. I was thinking of Slack. So, Slack really fits that to the bill. I mean, more people use Slack in the company, the better. But it doesn't have like a global sort of non-linearity as such.
Yeah, but like again, like non-linearity can be localized, right? Because in food delivery and ride hailing, it's per city. Between cities, there's almost no, like, it's almost all linear. But in B2B, it can be per company. Like it's the boundary is kind of very specific to the market again. Like you cannot just change them, but it's crucial to understand them, because if you do have non-linearity in your business, then you should take advantage of it, because this is where you get like a quite significant return.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, then one thing I wanted to focus on is pricing. And this is because pricing is something that I think does not get enough attention, often gets the wrong attention, or just people don't think about it right. And so in the long term, every market will be highly competitive market. Short term, there are some differences, but the way I think about price is just fixed costs plus variable costs plus 5% profit plus mode premium. So fixed cost is whatever it costs you to run the team. The bigger you are, the less generally the fixed cost, economy of scale kick in, the price goes down. So basically that part makes you more competitive as you scale. Variable cost is whatever you have allocated, like, I don't know, support and hosting, whatever you have per unit. Then 5% profit is like kind of the minimum that you get in a really highly competitive market, and the rest is mode premium, right? And there's a lot of this advices that I see that basically set your pricing to what the market will bear versus versus start from your costs. But I think it's kind of incorrect, because what the market will bear literally depends on what your mode is, like how and the mode is whatever competitive edge you have that differentiates you from competition, right? And all modes are actually coming from this non-linearity, like in one way or the other. So it's something, it can be this hard to migrate data, which is very common in B2B, that just you have vendor, like you're a vendor and you have store some data, and whether that data is configuration, or whether that data is user generated content, or whether that data is just like the whatever user database you have, then if it's the harder it is to migrate, basically the more kind of non-linearity you have, the more of a premium you can charge. Long-term contracts, like in B2B, sometimes just the market again has the pull that long-term contracts, or in kind of extreme cases, tenders and like even governmental tenders, kind of the more long-term, the more inflexible, the more basically kind of almost in the long-term, kind of the more differentiation you have, but there's a big difference between when you ramp up the business and when you can operate long-term, right? And then of course network effects and kind of everything else we talked about in this non-linearity. So this mode premium, it's your non-linearity premium, whether because of your like it's the way to think about, okay, why can I charge people more than it costs me? Like why won't they build it themselves? Why won't they use my competition? Why won't they do anything? So everything that is basically this mode premium, right? And sometimes like to bring an example, like if you have a premium, like your mode can absolutely be just your brand. Like if it's a luxury brand, if it's that's also okay. Like that people find value, basically they associate themselves with your brand. Like it can be completely psychological as well. And like I said, that hard value prop can really sometimes flip, where like the most softest values become the most important thing. And that's also fine. But like I think when setting the price, it's super important to understand why should you have more than 5% profit? Like what are the reasons? What are you charging for the consumers beyond that 5% profit? And especially if you also compete with big companies, like what allows them to charge? Because their fixed costs per unit are usually lower, unless they're really stupid about their costs, which is sometimes an advantage is just that you have lower costs, and that's your kind of mode for a long time, because the other party has either the market is under competitive, or just the cost base is really bad, and that's also a totally reasonable advantage, because none of those advantages will anyway last forever. But the best advantages are always this non-linear value propositions, which create the moat, competitive moat. So essentially, the cost of overcoming moat should be much smaller.
Just a quick question. I mean, I'm seeing on the chat. Can you share an example of a moat premium, perhaps sort of in the context of Bolt?
Sure. Like basically, let me think. What is a well? It kind of goes back to this previous slide that, like, for example, I'm an online travel agency, right? Booking.com. They can definitely charge like a bit higher, like they don't charge higher price. Sorry, the user's price is the same. They can charge the hotels much higher commission, right? So because basically they have global coverage, and because they have global coverage, they own like massive amount of the demand, right? And this creates this non-linearity. It's very hard to compete with them because you need to get this global coverage, and that is a big premium, which is very, very expensive. Because basically to get that global coverage, you also need the global demand, and it becomes this huge chicken and egg problem that you have to have massive investment to make. So they have a mode, and that mode is, I don't know, whatever, 10%, right? So if you come and want to compete with them, then probably you have to charge the hotels like minimum commission, like probably 5%, 5% commission, because just you are not being, you cannot offer them anywhere near the demand, right? And so this 15% of difference or whatever will be the difference between what you can charge and what Booking can charge, just because they have this mode. And same like with e-commerce, like the Amazon can charge like massive commission from the merchants. If you go to compete with Amazon, you will not be able to do that because basically they have like all the leverage in the market. The prices are so much better. So they have this critical mass. They own all the demand, and they can like kind of leverage that on the supply as well. In a SaaS business, let me think of I think there are less moats as such. I think Salesforce would be a good example, because just the level of integration they have and the level of sophistication that they offer is still kind of unmatched, and they know it, and they charge a big premium for that. And especially once you are on Salesforce platform, it's really hard to get off on it, because they own so much of your data. So they know that they can offer a lot of value proposition. They can charge a lot, and they know that that the next competitive like is kind of quite far from them, right?
And I suppose there might be some companies that have sort of an end-to-end solution that you can think of, and because of that, the sort of price that they're charging is bigger than the sum of its parts, in a sense, you know. So because they're
yeah. If you think about Salesforce, if basically anybody who is right now on Salesforce, take like a thought example to an extreme. Everybody who's using Salesforce, if basically they could switch from Salesforce to something else tomorrow with zero friction and with a drop of prices of 20%, they would absolutely do it. Like there is zero reason not to do it. So whatever doesn't allow you to do that, this is the moat, right? Because like in technology, this can be there can be different ways how it's structured, but in the end, the only reason why in some market the profit is more than 5% is something that stops people from switching to cheaper stuff. And in a lot of markets, actually, still the issue is just that it's kind of bottlenecks more than anything on attention to that market from good technology and product management teams. Like a lot of markets are still very under competitive, and this is why they get to charge these big premiums. So that has nothing to do even with non-linearity in the market. It has everything to do that the market itself is just under competitive, right? And as the markets become more competitive with time, then like this, the kind of the premiums that a lot of technology companies have enjoyed, they will shrink. However, they're still in markets where non-linearity is present. They will still keep like much higher profit margin than kind of in markets where this non-linearity is not present. I hope this makes sense. It is a complex topic. I'm not gonna say it's not. It's just like kind of the way I approach it. It's you know, and there's a lot of massive amount of kind of this devil in the details stuff here. But you know, that's how I do think about pricing nowadays. Is I try to, whenever somebody has price, I try to deconstruct here what are the costs and what is the premium. And it's also possible that it doesn't apply equally well to everything, right? I recently I've been much more dealing with marketplaces than with SaaS businesses, though historically I've done with that as well. And honestly, looking back, I would have looked at the SaaS the same way nowadays. Okay. Then I also said that once you kind of have figured out this hard value proposition, you focus on this high confidence, high ROI things. And there's a few lessons learned which I want to share, which might be helpful. So one is like very often technology companies have bias towards technology improvements over operational improvements, whereas I almost always kind of see that they should bias the other way. And here basically operations is everything that is not technology, more or less, right? So everything that is not product is operations. And like a good example, I found that in food delivery, almost in any kind of marketplace, like which sells something, having good photo coverage in and the food delivery particularly, having good photo coverage in food menus is much more valuable than almost anything else you can do in the app. Just having people be able to see what they're ordering before they order will probably have much more impact than anything you do in the actual digital app. Or for example, also same example from this food delivery is that providing instant support, like if I have a trouble because food delivery does have potentially a lot of issues, instant support is much more valuable than doing anything for me to gain visibility in how things are going, or like showing stuff. Like first and foremost, you have to fix the operations, and I find that the bias in the technology companies is the other way, but very often they're heavily underestimating what can be done with operations and heavily overestimating that what can be done with technology. So I'm not saying that you have to do only one or the other. It's just like I think the bias is the wrong way around a lot of the time. One of the very important thing is also people kind of have a bias to action, whereas I think like when you're building products, actually bias to non-action is better. This is more kind of relevant for product managers, but also for all of you who are building stuff up quickly. Like not doing things is how you create the most value, right? This is kind of often repeated when we talk about focus, but I like even more than saying but focus, I'm saying like what is the not doing list, and the not doing list is super important. Like I already mentioned that we launched Bolt Food with no delivery fee. Another thing which I think was a great kind of growth hack is if you think about this food delivery, then one very complex issue is that restaurants we have to upload the restaurant menus, right? And then these menus, they're very complex. It's a hierarchical data structure. They have translations, they have photos, they have options, different options that attach. They have different modifiers, like very complex structure. And basically, like first there was a proposal to build it, but the moment I saw it, I said, okay, this is too complex. This is not worth it. Can we just do those things like in Airtable? So like I think spreadsheet, but like eventually we use Airtable, which supports images well. But can we just create some spreadsheet data structure that does that, and build it there? It has really good support for like copy paste and like rearranging and all that stuff that we don't have to build, and go live with that. And turns out that yes, we can. And this was a huge shortcut. I think it saved us like several months of work to get our MVP launched. And I think like this kind of not doing and finding the shortcuts is super important. Like finding tools that already exist, buying software and so on, even if it's temporary, even if it's crappy, doesn't matter. Like you're in a race to create like hard value proposition. Anything that does not create hard value proposition can be shortcutted, can be substituted by operations, can be substituted by whatever crappy hacks. Because like that's kind of main thing. And actually, look, the others have done even better when we talk about Yandex Food. Which is the Russian food delivery company. They literally only had the app for the eaters, the app that you can order the food from, and everything else was handled through a call center. So the orders just went to a call center. They called the restaurant, ordered the food. They called the carrier, said go there, pick up the food, and and basically all the backend was essentially like a few hundred people taking calls and routing stuff and some back office software. So which I think is genius, right? So they did that for 2 years while they had time to build up the product, build up the business and everything. And there's still like a lot of stuff that we're still not doing. Like I'm not going to go into detail, but generally, when in doubt in product, I always bias to non-action. Whereas in operations, it's almost the other way around. You want to bias to action because in operations, since you're dealing with malleable people, very often tests are very cheap. Whereas in product, where you're dealing with inmalleable code, tests are very expensive. So you kind of want to not do as many things as possible. So a lot of stuff that I want to build in product, I will first validate through operations one way or the other, and only then we kind of go into product. Another thing, like, and this is a big lesson maybe from Bolt, but also from others, that generally, like, very often the bias I see from people who are building startups is that our competition is dumb. I think that's, again, is exactly the wrong bias. Assume that your competition is competent and they know something that you do not know, right? Try to learn with them. Try to reverse engineer what the hell do they know that you don't, and why do they do what they do? And sometimes you do reverse engineer that they are incompetent, but assuming that the competition is competent is very, very smart, because like it's kind of the bias from which you're much more likely to learn useful things than the other way around. And there's some, it's hard for me to bring generic examples here because like most of the time the examples are super specific, but like, for example, whenever I see a complex unsubscribe flow, I know for a fact that the retention is poor, right? The worst case I had is I subscribed for New York Times to read one article because there was no other. And basically to unsubscribe, I had to go to a live chat, said I unsubscribed, say no to three progressively better offers that they were offering me. And only then they were willing to unsubscribe me, right? And so I gathered from that basically they have like, I don't know, probably 60, 70% weekly churn, like that nobody stays there. It's so bad that you can just think that. But anyway, it's not always one-to-one, but like this is a good example of something to learn from others. Like by just looking at a subscribe flow, very often you can estimate what is the retention rate of your competition. And again, like forcing human contact and activation is often a sign of poor product market fit. Like if I cannot download and do the software, like some time ago, it was kind of everybody's bias. But nowadays, when I see that, I'm like, okay, I don't think the software is really good because basically it requires another human for me to even activate it. So sometimes like, okay, early on you need that because your software is crappy and you're kind of trying to ensure that this hard value prop is getting there. But more often than not today, it's like, it's kind of sign of something is wrong than something is good. Okay, and so the final section is about go-to-market, and then I can answer your questions. So a couple of also lessons here that this is maybe less useful for those of you which is in software as a service, but generally software as a service is like kind of heavily focused on user and account lifecycle. Okay, here I have the word isolation missing. Oh wait, how do I do that? I've learned to do this some time ago because otherwise I will forget. One thing to remember about the users is that users don't exist in isolation. And so very often the kind of user referrals is greatly underestimated. Like the user lifecycle. One great example of that is I've seen somebody's analysis which said that, hey, we analyzed some channel and that channel acquisition was like, it brought us really poor users. Like those users were the user economics of those users was just very bad. We were barely breaking even of those users. But and so we basically closed that channel and we're not doing it anymore. But I thought that this was what the question which I found wasn't answered is I knew for a fact that was a market with this kind of non-linear hard value prop, which means the more users there are, the better the value for all of the users. So one is I didn't see the estimation of the effects of those users of the market overall and if they were valuable. And second, I did not see if those users are referring good users. So even if you have users which are bad unit economic on their own, they might actually they might create buzz around it, right? That maybe the value prop for them is amazing and they create a great buzz for you, which in then brings you users with good unit economics. So I think this kind of change often underestimating when doing this purely microeconomical analysis, that you have to look at the effect on the larger market as well. Yeah, so like again, like best markets have higher value to everybody when the market grows. So that kind of has to be this referrals, the nonlinearity that has to plug in into your models so that you don't underestimate the channel, so you don't underestimate your users, because they might have more value to you in the market than just like kind of directly visible from this, from the acquisition, retention, like engagement lifecycle. Okay. So finally, I think this is one of my last slides. So finally, like I spent a lot of this kind of talking about this product and really value proposition. But just to say a few words about go-to-market is, I think the place where people look at go-to-market wrongly is that I look at go-to-market only as amplification of the product kind of value proposition. Like the product has, once you have product market fit, once you have great this measurable hard value proposition, you really want to scale it. You want to reach as many users as you can to be able to tell them. But here there are some problematic trade-offs that very often are not taken into account. So very often people go paid acquisition way, because that's a way, it's a very predictable way to scale the company, the business quickly. But what they allow the paid acquisition to leak into the pricing of the product, right? So like very often, like enterprise sales is classical. You have a thing, your VC tells you should get like sales, you should get enterprise sales. But of course, since you get enterprise sales, you need to raise the prices by 250%. And now, like basically, you allowed your go-to-market to affect the value proposition of your product, which very often is kind of this hidden cost, hidden effect that people don't put enough attention to, but it's huge. It can destroy your business. Like this was kind of one of the big things that we learned exactly in my first company, that we went with this really expensive VC promoted paid acquisition channels. We raised the pricing to accommodate it, and so we kind of for a while grew the company quickly, and then we ran out because basically the value proposition of the product was now so much worse that the market shrunk. And in the end, it was, I think, like a bad decision that value proposition should always drive go-to-market, not the other way around. And the other also kind of lesson learned from a long time ago is that cold outreach and even warm outreach can actually damage the brand and drive down the referrals, drive down the non-linearity. So this is another like kind of this completely invisible cost that you again, it's a way to scale the market quickly, but then you have to try and measure basically things like NPS. Like sales hate when you measure NPS, in my experience, but you have to kind of measure that the interactions are good, that the people still want to promote your product, because this is a great way kind of to destroy some of the non-linearity of the market, which might be incredibly helpful for you down the line. Okay, so like usually, when you talk about product market fit, like usually it's a lack of hard value proposition, but some general root causes for that are either small non-existent market, and then so this is kind of when I see teams pitching to me, this is what usually I see the problem is, right? So what is the problem with people, not so much with the products and markets. So either people pursue a small non-existent market and they kind of trying to force products and value proposition onto it, which just doesn't support, the market just doesn't support it. Sometimes people people have some kind of a actual market, but they invent a much bigger market around it, right? So I don't know, let me bring a couple of examples, I guess. Small non-existing market, well, this is, I don't know, if you make lingerie for dogs, then probably there's no market for that because nobody cares. Lack of understanding what the market actually is. Like a very common one is exactly this mobility as a service. Their market is essentially like helping users plan the route, but the market that they'll talk about is that, oh, all of the money that flows through public transportation, ride hailing, scooters, and so on, this is our market. But actually, they don't have they do not have real access to that market. Like this is they lack the value proposition to aggregate that market. But there's a lot of other. But basically, when when you see some kind of, this is the wishful thinking that you need to have a hard value proposition for the market that you're targeting. If you don't have the hard value proposition, then this is not your market. This is wishful thinking. Very often lack of understanding of market and product fundamentals, and this exactly comes like what are the things you're measuring? Do you measure are the things that measure actually relevant for your users, for your partners? Like are you measuring hard value proposition, or are you measuring random things? Do you have a good understanding what that is? And very often just visual thinking or proper research and iteration. So this is just kind of some common pitfalls I see, and maybe it will resonate with some of you and help you kind of come back to why I even talk about this hard value proposition so much. So finally, the next presentation in the series is this product-led growth. And I thought that, damn it, I don't actually want product-led growth. I want value-led growth. Like it comes back to that a long time ago, brilliant company said, like, damn, this product management is named completely wrongly. It should be called problem management. What we actually do, we seek out user problems and we seek out great solutions and ways to create value for users. So again, I would much rather think about value-led growth, like the value that we create, the users itself drives the growth of the company, right? And this is I think, like, if you focus on value above else, that creates a lot of good trade-offs. And here are some example that I came up with of trade-offs. Like, for example, Atlassian, they're very famous that exactly they avoided this pitfall of letting your go-to-market affect your pricing. They priced the product very attractively to the user. That product otherwise is not terribly differentiated, but it priced so attractively that they're almost impossible to compete with, because like, just they left much less on the table than most technology companies are, and they're growing very, very well, very nicely. But that was like an incredibly good decision, because and it informed the pricing, I think, for a lot of other companies like Slack and like Zoom, where you basically don't need to price as much per user, and you don't need enterprise sales to go to enterprises. If the value prop is great, the enterprises will come to you eventually. I think Amazon has been great at focusing on reducing costs over driving innovation. That's right in their kind of manifesto, is that, you know, every penny saved goes to the users, right? And they've been amazing at that. And this is the one thing they focused on, and that's how they created value, and that drove everything else. And they never, you know, they never focused on like having the like kind of. What I mean here, driving innovation, is that they focus on this very few things, and they, like, innovation, I know for a fact, was a dirty word at Amazon, and they focused on this, like, really like hard value prop one thing. I don't know, for Amazon you can put a lot of other things as well, right? But they focus on reducing costs over everything else. I think Google, like Google search page at its time, was a wonderful example how they focused on this, on people finding things, right? For them, this hard value prop, if I find something quickly, then kind of my hard value prop, my goal is fulfilled, and this is a very measurable thing. So they focused on that, and they removed all the distractions away from that path. You know, at that point, there's a lot of portals, and so just as much as the fact that they had better technology, I think in the beginning it was helped that they were focused on this one thing. And Apple is still kind of focused on amazing experience, so they actually charge a premium for that. And they of course, the brand is also huge for them, right? So they focus on crafting an amazing experience, a great brand, and actually they charge a premium for that over creating a better offer, and that's also something that can work quite well. Okay, so going back to the new product recipe, so focus on hard value proposition, really understand what is driving the value in your market, focus on only high confidence, high ROI activities in the beginning, and plug operations and like whatever, seek shortcuts, create not doing lists, and seek and plug operations on whatever else you can. Then hard value proposition is what drives the user account growth, acquisition, retention, referral, plus the non-linearity, plus and then the GTM activity should accelerate your growth at high ROI, but should not affect hard value prop, right? So that's kind of the recipe that I suggest that I've been using and that I recommend to others. So that's it from me, and I'll take questions now.
Jevgeni, thank you so much. That was some solid content right there. I really appreciate it. And people, I know Jevgeni can be a machine gun when he presents, so don't worry. We have the presentation later on. You can go through it with more time. But that was some solid content right there. Thanks so much for that. We have a few questions, and feel free, people, to still put some more up that we're going to go through. So we'll start with the first one, and you can probably, Jevgeni, see these. But so in terms of your thoughts on value-based pricing and pricing in general, how does the price affect the perceived value? So yeah. So basically, value-based pricing is the question. What are your thoughts on that?
So this is a very interesting question. And perception, and this is where like perception and reality start to matter, right? And like kind of one thing to understand is long-term perception matches reality. Typically in the long term, like all markets are efficient in the long term, right? So this is kind of the difference between perception and reality. This is what the economists call market efficiency, how well the information spreads. And long term, all markets are efficient. Short term or medium term, they might be quite inefficient. So perception might differentiate from reality, and you can affect it. And long-term might be, by the way, completely irrelevant for us, because long-term might be 20 years. And by then, like, most probably the thing you're working on right now is pretty irrelevant, unless you're one of the very, very lucky few. So I definitely tend to think about perception and reality. I tend to focus first on reality and designing the reality, and then correcting for perception, right? So in the same, like when I say about this mode premium, if I know that if there's a perception component, absolutely I can add a perception component on that. I can say, okay, I know, like, let's say, I know that my product is actually quite easy to build, but I know that it's, for some reason, it's perceived as quite hard to build. So I know that for the next 10 years, nobody will build it. So I can charge like another 20% just because it's perceived to be hard to be, or I can, or like, you know, but in the end, like, in the end, all markets are competitive, and eventually somebody will build like everything, right? So, so that is again, perception is like, and absolutely, like when I see that there's a difference between reality and perception, I kind of plug it into the formula and I just account for it. Okay, here's the reality, and here's how I modify it for perception. Like I add like whatever 20% for perception. Now it accounts for perception as well, right? And this is my kind of thought of this value-based pricing. That like basically I say, okay, if there's a perception premium I can charge, super. But I also know that perception premium most probably will not be forever, right? That is something that erodes over time, and like that is not something I can hope for forever. But today I can charge it, great.
Yeah. And in general, and also if I can't remember who it was that asked Kalle. So if you have any questions, and if you didn't take part, we had a session on pricing earlier last month. So feel free to check our YouTube channel for the video on that. That's I think answering to some of your questions there, perhaps. Do you see another question that you'd like to answer, or should I just pick one?
Yeah, I'm going through, like, next is question from Gleb. Has the hard value proposition approach generated any unintended consequences? When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. So this is like, the very important thing here is to measure things which are market fundamentals. Like, market fundamentals are not product dependent. They're not your internal measures at all. They're something that is external, and something that measures the actual kind of value that people get. And that does not in itself change over time. Like it can change over time when there's like significant transformations in your market, but most of the time it's a very stable metric, and it's not something that you generally game. There's a lot of internal metrics which are absolutely gameable and which are dangerous, but I generally think that hard value proposition metrics like are rarely gameable. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I think those are exactly kind of your true things to focus on.
Yeah. I think we have time for one more, and I'll pick the last one if I may. So basically, relating to your product team composition, how was it in the beginning when you launched the food delivery for Bolt, and how did it change compared to when you were first launching the ride-hailing service? So can you remember the sort of the differences, or if there were any, in terms of the competition of composition of the product team?
So I just basically I bootstrapped like an independent vertical for us. What I think we did very well is that I had like a product manager paired with an operations manager. So I had like two sides of the coin working together, and they both reported to me, and they both were like a single team. And the three of us, like with some support from other departments and management, we were kind of the core of the team that launched it, and that worked really well, right? So this pairing of product manager, like, who was really good, really entrepreneurial product manager, and really entrepreneurial operations manager, and so I think like that was a very successful model. That's the same model we then used in rentals. That's the same model we used in others. And when we actually boot up, when the food delivery and rentals booted up, then what became important is also to build out those matrices, because we had those three parallel hierarchies at that point, which all needed to be, basically, we had the giant Excel where we mapped out all the hierarchies, all the functional teams, how do they interact with each other, different teams that have to be built on different levels. And it becomes kind of this, organizational design exercise, which is obviously like, it's complex from the point it's complex in execution, but it's not actually complex in planning. It's just a matrix.
Right. Yeah, I get it. Very good. So I think that's all we have time for. Thanks everybody for joining, and thanks for the questions. And thank you first of all, or mostly Yevgeny. That was wonderful. And please do check his slides and make use of them. I think there's a lot of good points that many of you as SaaS founders and product managers and others can employ in your businesses. So thanks once again, and we'll be seeing you tomorrow then, everybody else, and have a great night.
Thank you.
Bye.